about half of our group here this morning. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we are recording the call today. We're going to begin recording these conference calls and posting them to the ICOP website, so if folks aren't able to be here during the call, you can always have other colleagues or staff members hop on our website and access the calls there. So this is our second call in ICOP's Peer Learning Series, and we will be doing these mostly monthly learning calls for the year. They will sometimes be webinars, and each call will feature one or more Community Foundation peers who want to share experiences or new ideas around a certain topic for each month. We did go ahead and publish the full listing of monthly topics in the January CF snapshot, and that is available on the ICOP website as well. We just uploaded an archive of our newsletter, so you can access those on the website at any time. Today's topic is a development roundup focusing on annual development plans. And we have two colleagues on the call today that will share their experiences around this topic, and then we will open it up for questions and other discussion around really any development items that are happening at your foundations or questions that you have for your colleagues. First, we'll hear from Sheila Kinman, who is the Chief Advancement Officer at the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines, and then Jennifer Garst, who is the Executive Director of the Story County Community Foundation. Each of our speakers will share their expertise in working in community foundation development, and we are excited that we'll be able to hear two unique perspectives. Sheila's from a large urban and metropolitan community foundation, and Jennifer sharing her perspective of growing affiliate funds at a county-wide territory, which includes both urban and rural communities. So very appreciative that both of them are willing to share some of their best practices and tips for you around their development work. I will ask, if you haven't done so already, just please go ahead and mute your phones while our speakers are sharing their information. And then if you have questions, once we open it up, you can unmute and add to this discussion at that time. So I will go ahead and turn things over to Sheila to get us started.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you much, and thank you for everybody who's on the phone today. It's nice to have this peer-to-peer learning, and I certainly hope I frame my comments today so that everybody can take them and use them for what's appropriate for their model, because I certainly acknowledge up front that our model could be vastly different from other people's. But again, I'm hoping that I will frame these responses in a way that would apply to all of you. For the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines, I'll kind of talk about it from that frame, and then I will break it down to just in general our affiliates, which of course Jennifer will handle in more detail with them. But Joe wishes he could be here today. He is the person who takes care of our affiliates, but he's on spring break in California, so I'm handling with his approval. So for our development plans for us, we kind of have like this macro-micro way of handling it. And what I mean by that is I think we're on year 4 of a 5-year strategic plan. So about 4 years ago, we came up with this large strategic plan for the entire organization. And it all had just different categories, advancement. That's what we call our department, is advancement. And then there's community investment and et cetera. So they all have their categories. For the advancement, it set these large-scale goals for where we wanted to be at by 2017. Okay? Then when I go down micro, we then break out our large plans into annual plans. Okay? So that's kind of nice for me, because then, and I would recommend it for anybody, because it gives me clear direction from the board, clear direction from Christy, our president, on where we want to be in 5 years, and then I can break it down annually and not be all over the place with direction. So we have 8 areas that I was going to share with you that are in our strategic plan and then break down to our annual plan. And our 8 areas that we choose to focus on is based off of return on investment. So ROI, if I want to use the acronym. But for return on investment for us, and again, this is different for all community foundations, is we are able to do our work in the community when we have administrative fees for funds. So that's, when we say return on investment, we're looking at how can we open as many funds as possible, because we charge an admin fee off of that. And then how do we open the right kind of funds? Because we don't focus on all kinds of funds. We focus on very specific funds that we feel are best for us and best for our return on investment. So I'll cover that as well. So our first area that we focus on is professional advisors. They are our largest referral source by far. And it's because our favorite fund type and our largest book of business is donor advised funds. And professional advisors seem to understand, like donor advised funds for their clients. So that is our first area that we focus on. Through various, I won't get into the, exactly what we do with them, but we focus on outreach, education for professional advisors, primarily on donor advised funds. Second, we focus on donor cultivation. Donor cultivation to us means anybody with a current fund. So if it's a donor advised fund, a designated fund, whatever, we focus on relationships with them, making sure they have the best customer service, making sure they're educated on our services, that they really like us. And here's why. Because at the end of the day, we're hoping that once somebody opens their fund, they will continue to put more money in their fund. And in fact, about last year, 66% of all of our money that came in last year, 66% of that came from current fund holders. And on my strategic plan and annual goals, my goal is to get to 70% of all the money that came in. So last year we raised, I hesitate to tell you because I don't want it to feel like it's too large scale, but last year we brought in a little bit over $50 million. So 66% of that, a little over $50 million, $51 million, came in from current fund holders. So we do lots of things around them. Then about 30%, or our goal is 30%, represents our third category that we focus on, and that's new donor prospecting. That ties in very closely with with professional advisors because they are our biggest referral source. But again, our board helps us with that. We just want to get people in the door to open funds. When we have somebody open a fund, we have a very small, what I'll call a fund retirement rate. Very few people, once they get in the door and open a fund, very few of them close them, which is very nice. It's a nice thing to measure. And so if we can get 30% at least of our gifts in money, so that's 51 some odd million dollars brought in last year, if we can get at least 30% to come from new fund holders, we know we can get them in the pipeline and moving towards the current fund advisors, which we know we can keep, help them make happy, they put more money in their fund, and assets grow, and then we have more administrative fees to do the other more meaningful work we all know that we all do in the community. I mentioned to you that we have a few favorite fund types that we focus on. For us, when we look at ROI, our best funds are, I mentioned, donor advised funds. The second one are designated funds, work very well for us. And then legacy funds. I don't know if legacy funds is widespread around community foundations, but legacy funds are where it's a shell fund with nothing in it, but it outlines their estate plan giving plans, and then it doesn't realize the assets until the donors pass away. So legacy funds are very popular, highly desirable, and we market those heavily with our estate planners, our estate attorneys. Fourth is agency funds. That's our second largest asset, so that's the fourth area of focus for us. And agency funds, they're endowments, whether they're I'll call it a regular endowment or whether it's their Endow Iowa fund. We have a lot of agencies under our umbrella, and they've been wonderful to work with, and we keep focusing and growing that area. Fifth for us is Keep Iowa Growing. If you haven't heard of that program, it's fairly new for us, but it's our farmland retention program. And still marketing that heavily. Again, that's a kind of a professional advisor outreach as well, because usually a gift of farmland, especially if you retain it, is quite a technical gift. And so it's usually driven by our professional advisors who work with their clients. Sixth, I've mentioned this, but it's legacy funds. It's our largest opportunity. And I don't know what the national average is, but statistically I heard, and Jennifer probably knows the statistic on this, but an estate gift is 7 times larger than a donor's annual gift. So these are gifts with certainly a lot of meaning, a lot of legacy behind them, very important, and stand to be much larger. Of course, you got to be patient on those, though, because they don't hit the books at all for a very long time, or at least we hope they don't hit the books for a while. But again, that's kind of that more long-term view. And then our 8th area, and it's not 8th because it's less important, but it's just number 8 on my list, is raising money for our Better Together Fund, which is the name of our unrestricted fund, and that Angie and others here do our community-based grant making out of. So focusing and raising money on that and has a goal around for us. Moving on to the next question is and there's, just so you can kind of count them down with me, there's about 6 areas of focus that we were given to focus on this, and this is the 3rd of 6. Affiliates. The question was, how do we assist affiliates with their development plans and best practices? So for us, and again, I'm going to just touch on this slightly because I know Jennifer will say so much more on this, is a few things that Joe does that he feels has been successful is offering different types of trainings for the affiliate boards and their staff. The growth models that we were both given, they're kind of like 3 areas. He does take that into consideration as far as where is that particular affiliate at and what kind of training do they need, because the training that, say, Story County would need is much, much different than the training another affiliate would need. So they're just in different growth stages, and so he tries to customize that based on where they're at. We're actually working on this right now. An affiliate survey, I think, is key because we don't want to, as a host community foundation, we don't want to guess at what they want. We want to ask them what they want and see what we can do to fulfill what they're wanting. So I think a survey of your affiliates is certainly a best practices on what they would find helpful as resources. Joe does pre-scheduled one-on-ones with his affiliates. Whether they need it or not, I don't know, but he just has them pre-scheduled, and so he does a touch base with them. We offer all kinds of marketing support, or we hope we do. Just templates when we have them. We like to share the templates so they can customize them. We help with professional advisor outreach because much like here in the metro, professional advisors are a huge resource, but also out there in the rural affiliates. I almost think in some ways it's, and I hope I'm not saying this wrong, but I feel like if you have the right professional advisors in some of these smaller towns, in my small town, the town attorney handles almost the entire town. And their clients are very loyal to them. Like my dad's attorney, we went to school with his kids. There's very deep roots there. And so cultivating the professional advisors in the smaller rural affiliates, I feel is very, very important. So is Joe. We help with donor one-on-one meetings if the affiliate wants it. We release a newsletter monthly, and then we have quarterly trainings as well through what's called the ICANN network. So those are just some brief affiliate best practices we have. I was asked to comment on roadblocks that we see in our development plan. And I thought about this for a little while. There's such a series of things, but some things that I think impact us, especially for our model, is certain things like the stock market. If the stock market is either just so-so or if it's volatile, I'm not talking about the endowments we hold. I'm talking about people wanting to give their money. We, when they are dealing with their wealth, and a lot of them have it tied up in investments, if they don't feel secure or if the stock market is misbehaving, I'll call it, then it's harder for them to put money into their donor advised funds, their designated funds. I also have seen a sharp increase in competition from Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguards. These are those commercial donor advised funds. Again, because donor advised funds are our largest book of business. It's hard to compete with them. Their fees are cheaper. They can set up the fund. It's all automated and set up the fund really fast. So they're really convenient. And we try to sell ourselves as kind of the more boutique option, the more local option. We're pretty competitive with the price, but it's still a challenge. That also goes for our agency funds. Our agency funds, it gets a little challenging when when we have a fee with our agency funds, we have an admin fee and an investment fee. Well, they can just go to Morgan Stanley and only have an investment fee, no admin fee from the community foundation. So we really have to sell our value add for our fees with the agency funds, and that's I would call kind of a roadblock or just something that you have to work around and be aware of. My final question, the sixth and final question for my piece of this today, is how do we utilize a development committee? For us, we have our board, and then they all branch off into subcommittees. Our advancement committee is what we call it. It has about 8 members of the board. And how we use them is we actually design the goals and the plan each year, but we present that to them. They review it. They make adjustments or suggestions, and then they approve it. Their main function is for them to look at our we call it the pipeline, and the pipeline is all our prospects or people we're talking with, and we ask them to help us open doors, make introductions. Doesn't matter if it's on the golf course or inviting them to our annual luncheon. We give them all different types of ideas of how they can make connections for us. Another thing would be, with our current fund holders being such a big part of what we do, making connection with current fund holders. A lot of times they might hear of a current fund holder, it's their friend, and they know that they sold a business this year. Taxable moment, remind them of that, their donor advised fund or their fund community foundation might be a good option. So that's, if I was to boil down into 3 areas for our development committee, that's what that would be. Okay, I think I made it through my list of things that I went through fairly quickly, but I at least give a nice introduction that will set us up for some questions maybe down the road.
Great. Thanks, Sheila. I did have a question that one of our attendees submitted with their registration, and it actually ties into what you were just talking about, your resource development committee of your board. And it sounds like they do quite a bit in helping you execute the plan, but the question that was asked is how involved they are in developing your advancement plan.
Right. So we develop it, but they get to review, maybe make some suggestions or adjustments, and then final approve it. But we set the plan. And part of what, if you back up to, like where I first started off is there's not a lot of debate on our plan annually with our resource development committee because it's all connected to that 5-year strategic plan, which I will say is kind of helpful because sometimes you get really enthusiastic board members who you love, but they might come up with a strategy or an idea or a goal that is way off in left field. What helps is to always bring them back and say, okay, but how does that fit our 5-year strategic plan? Because once in a while we do get that, not a ton, but that does really help give them direction and focus. So for us, that's why they review, approve, and make suggestions on the development plan, but they do not take the initial run at it at all. It's staff.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and open it up for any other questions from the group for Sheila.
Sheila, this is Randy Kuhlman in Fort Dodge.
Hello.
Just a question regarding your professional advisors. Can you just briefly talk about some of your outreach to them? What do you do to reach them, educate them, build those relationships with them?
Sure. Our first plan of action is what I'm going to call lunch and learns. We do have a budget for purchasing food, and we offer to go into their place of business and over the lunch hour bring food, or you could do it over, I suppose it could be a lot cheaper if you did coffee in the morning or something like that, but we just happen to do lunch hour. And we do a 1-hour training for them. We also apply for continuing ed credits. We've done CLE, CFP, CPE, those credits. That also helps it. And so they come in, we train them, we feed them, give them a credit or two, and then we leave. So we do it in an hour. Our topic on that is our topic can vary, but our most popular is accepting non-cash assets. and then also how to have the charitable conversation with their clients. So those are the two most popular. And then we also do just one-on-one meetings. We have a list that we work off of, and we just try and go in and meet with them and educate them on who we are and our products. Another is we have a specific marketing budget, like a postcard or different things like that, that go out to our list of professional advisors. We spend a lot of time making sure we have a robust contact list of professional advisors, and it takes it's quite an undertaking because they move obviously and everything around, so you have to keep it updated. But that's been our 3 primary areas of focus for professional advisor outreach.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sheila, this is Michelle with Cedar Rapids.
Okay.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the legacy fund type that you said about you established the shell. Do you recognize the donor then during their lifetime and steward them, and then it's funded? So talk a little bit about how you operate that fund.
Sure. So to answer your first question, do we recognize them during a lifetime? Yes, if they want us to. So they name the fund just like anybody else, the Kinman Legacy Charitable Fund, pretend. They can name it whatever they want. And that will show up in our annual report, online, etc. I will say some of these, because they are estate gifts and they just want to remain anonymous, a lot of them, they just don't even want them on the fund list until they pass away. So we do let them tell us in advance. These funds are nice because the fund agreement is a fill in the blank, like all of our fund agreements, but then there's this one area where it's distributions, where it's highly customizable, where they can say, I've got some that are like 13 nonprofits, and their distribution is like, 5.323 or something. We customize according to what they want. Then what's nice, or a big marketing tool for these legacy funds, is as the donor changes their mind, they're not locked in. They don't have to open up their fund to readjust their will because they changed their mind on the agency. They just call, email, meet with us, and they can change it all up. We have one lady, she meets with Christy, our president, almost like every year to change her percentages. If a nonprofit spelled her name wrong, she takes them out. So, it's something that we market as a flexible legacy planning tool that they can adjust while they're alive, but then we'll have like control from the grave. I don't use those terms publicly, but they could have essentially control from the grave on exactly how it plays out. Or their kids can take over. It could dump into a donor advised fund. It's a legacy fund that behaves like a donor advised fund, and then the kids take over and administer that asset that came from the estate.
Thank you. I really appreciate the knowledge of that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sheila. We will go ahead and turn it over to Jennifer, and then at the end we can open it back up for questions for both of our speakers. So, Jennifer, if you could tell us about your development planning.
I will. One thing I would like to add on, as a former plan giving person, I want to add on to Sheila, is one of the advantages of a legacy fund is if people have that in their estate plans, they should be treated like a major donor, so that today they're very vetted as an important person in your organization. Because I actually inherited a plan giving program where if people weren't giving annual gifts, they got forgot about, and people took that nonprofit out of their estate plan because they weren't treated well after they told intentions to leave an estate gift. So that's just a kind of a follow-up to Sheila. I was going to take a kind of a different approach to this question of planning, and just to give you a little background of the Story County Community Foundation, 5 years ago, the Community Foundation was surviving on the self-grant from the gaming dollars that came in. That's all the money we had as an organization to survive. So 5 years ago is when I started, and we did our first plan. And at that point, we had zero money to operate with, and we had many nonprofit funds. And I think we had 2 donor-advised funds. So we have a different model than what Sheila was talking about, in that we are very focused on nonprofit funds, and also our other goal was to raise money for ourselves. I was hired on a grant originally, and we felt like to make our foundation strong, we needed staff. So we started out with what are our goals, and at this point we have a goal to grow our funds that are controlled by the Community Foundation itself to support our operations and to give more grants away. And this year our goal is to raise $90,000 for that endeavor. We also want to grow our family of funds, which is all the other funds under us, by $1 million. And obviously these goals are different than they were 5 years ago, but it was the same 2 goals. And we want to make the Community Foundation the expert or go-to entity for philanthropy, and we want to make sure we're treating donors in a donor-centric method. So for the last 5 years, we've had 4 goals. And then our Resource Development Committee worked very closely with me early on in trying to figure out, okay, we have goals. What are our strategies, exact strategies that are going to get us there? So we created a very strategic plan that actually hasn't changed a lot in the last 5 years. It gets tinkered with, and it's our first kind of major strategy area is development and solicitation of new funds and donors. And under that is number 1, face-to-face meetings, and at this point we have a goal of 120 face-to-face meetings, basically talking to people one-on-one about the Community Foundation. And we have under that donors, potential donor-advised funds, professional advisors. We basically put numbers to every strategy we have so we can say, are we meeting it or are we not meeting it? And it was really hard to come up with exactly what strategies we need to do. The next strategy is mailing. The next strategy is cultivation and steward of our existing donor-advised funds and designated funds. Down the line, and it's in order of priority. So we spent a lot of time creating our initial development plan because it was kind of the contract between me, who was doing a lot of the work, and the board saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. And I think Sheila was right, because you always have people coming in with left-handed ideas in the last minute, and it's like, okay, if we do that, what are we not going to do? So you have a negotiation tool, and I also call it an embarrassment tool, because our plan is a plan where every 2 months I go through each of the strategies and say, how am I doing? I have a scorecard that is shared with the board every month that says, I'm hoping to make 110 calls, face-to-face calls this month. How did I do? And it's a graph. So it's a plan, a contract basically, and then I evaluate myself with that plan every month. And it's good for me because embarrassment causes me to do things at the end of the month to get ready for the graph stage. So, you know, the reality is right after a board meeting, I'm not making as many calls as I do right before a board meeting. So it's kind of one of those where I think the important part of a plan is the thought going into it, and do you have the right strategies to make the goals you need to make? And those could be anything. When I first started, nobody knew who the Community Foundation was. So one of my huge goals was at the beginning, I was like, I'm out there and I made something like 55 presentations the first year. My goal was to just get our name out there. So, and now it's not, our name is out there, now we need to cultivate. Another part of our plan, and the Community Foundation in Story County is different than Des Moines, because our model is we have nonprofit funds and we have hundreds of people who are giving little bits of money to those nonprofit funds or not a lot, or big gifts to those nonprofit funds. We're not the model of the donor advised fund. We support nonprofits, and I think of myself as the Mary Kay salesman. So one of the other strategies we have is how do we train the nonprofits to raise their own dollars for their endowment. So we're kind of doing the Mary Kay model where we're training the trainer, and 70 to 80% of the dollars that walk in our door every year are coming through the nonprofits themselves. So that's a different model than what Sheila was talking about, and that also creates different strategies for us. And in fact, we recently hired a couple years ago. I'm kind of the main development person. I work 20 hours a week, so half-time, and we hired another person in our office whose goal is to really work with the nonprofit funds and help them grow themselves, where the big growth is coming in our county. So it's kind of a different model than what Sheila called, but again, it's planning it out, plan the plan, evaluate your plan, and then report. And at the end of each year, I hand the board my full plan with all the evaluation on it so they can see how we did. And thankfully, it's working very well, so each year we tinker, but we don't change. The resource committee at the very beginning of creating this plan was very important. Now they're important just to tinker, but since we have a model that works, we haven't been changing it up greatly. So I think that's all I have to say unless people have questions.
Jennifer, one question I have is what some of the specific trainings you're doing with the nonprofits are. When I was at the Community Foundation in Dubuque, that was one of my main responsibilities. So obviously talk with them about Endow, Iowa, and why working with the Community Foundation is beneficial. But what are some other key points you're driving home when you're working with those groups?
Well, we have, first off, Eileen, who is working mostly with that. She calls up every one of those nonprofits about this time of year and talks about how much money they have in their fund. So she touches base with them and saying, and our message is, we're here to help you. And the problem we have is you can't generate enthusiasm from a nonprofit unless they have it themselves. So we kind of try to encourage and give the leadership of the nonprofit skills or desire to want to grow their funds. Like one of the stories we've been telling is $2.1 million was raised last year in our county through the Community Foundation. And you kind of look at the nonprofits and say, you're not getting a piece of that pie. You have to actually engage. So you have to try to encourage them to be enthusiastic, which is hard because they need today's dollars, and we're mostly talking about tomorrow's dollars. The next thing we do is we have brown bags now fairly regularly that are having an avenue for our nonprofits to get together and talk with one another. And it's coming to fruition that the nonprofits are saying, hey, if we work together, we're all going to be better. We're not fighting over donors. We just need to make sure the donors, they love one organization over the other. That doesn't mean we have to compete for them. So that's helping a lot. We go out to board meetings. We meet with staff. We offer to do presentations to their donors. We're kind of trying any strategy, but our first strategy has been personal contact.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have questions for Jennifer or Sheila?
Hey, maybe I could add something. This is Sheila, just to build off what Jennifer said. I think at the end of the day, even when I hear from Jennifer and what helps with us, and maybe I don't need to point this out, but having a plan, whatever your angle is, having a plan and sticking to the plan and working on it and tracking, how, Jennifer even said they track it, and, how she shows the results monthly. You have these points of measurements, and then sticking with it is so important no matter what the plan is, because a lot of these plans, it takes years. I mean, I remember implementing some of these plans 5 years ago, and we're just now starting to see the fruits of our labor. So, like consistency, the drip method. Jennifer even saying how they had to start with just getting people to know them. So, and if you change it up every single year, you won't get the results, because it does take a long time for you to just stay with a few strategies in order to see your results. So, for whatever that's worth, I just wanted to emphasize that.
Great. Thanks, Sheila. Alrighty. It sounds like that might be all the questions we have for today. I'm sure Sheila and Jennifer are both open to any follow-up calls or conversations that you want to have. I'd like to thank both of you for sharing information about your development plans and how you're working your strategies. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise. And I would just like to give a quick plug for our April quarterly membership meeting, which will be April 28th, and this meeting will be in Cedar Rapids. It's a community foundation focusing in on disaster philanthropy and the role that foundations can play in preparing, responding to, and recovering after, disasters that could be natural disasters or otherwise. So we have some national experts coming in, and we will also be going on a short learning tour in the afternoon to see the ways that the Cedar Rapids community has responded after the flooding that they've experienced. It's a really great story that they have to share, and I'm excited to have everyone together in that community to experience it and learn from the folks at the Community Foundation there. So please plan to join us. More information coming on that in our next e-newsletter, and we hope you can join us for the next peer learning call, which will also be shared in greater detail in our next CS snapshot. So thanks again for joining us this morning, and we hope you found the conversation valuable. Take care, everyone.
Bye.